Our discussion today is going to be about lessons we've learned on teaching students resilience. Let me introduce our panelists, and then I want to get right into the discussion. So we have two incredible panelists today. First, we have April Leong. April was born and raised in Brooklyn, started her career in District 79 as an English teacher and family group advisor. As a young mother raised in poverty, April was determined not only to create a better life for her children, but also believed that what was good for her boys was good for everyone else's children. During her teaching career at High School Redirection, April was awarded the Allan Houston My Teacher is My Hero Award, responsible for creating many innovative programs in youth development and community service. Also an integral member of the team who brought the nationally recognized Alternative High School Initiative Diploma Plus to New York City. As an assistant, Principal April successfully transformed two underperforming suspension sites and received awards of recognition for outstanding leadership from her staff, principal, and superintendent. Her work at Liberation has been recognized on numerous occasions by her assemblyman, councilman, state senator, been recognized extensively for the great work you've done, April. I'm trying to make sure I get everything else in here that's important. Received Daily News Hometown Hero Award 2013. Combination of all the hard work and passion that you have. April, we're so thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, just thank you for allowing me to be in this space along with my sister, Dr. Farrington, to just share a little bit about who we are and what we do. I don't know what else to say except that what's on paper, if it seems long on paper, it's a lot longer in real life.
That is the truth. Oh, that's funny. Thank you so much. And I have it on good authority because I just read it in the chat that you are kind of a big deal. So welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Next, we have Dr. Allison Farrington. Dr. Farrington is the founder and principal of Research and Service High School, RSHS, in Brooklyn, New York. She believes that strong community school relationships are essential to academic and civic achievement. Find any successful school, and you'll also find parents and community members who are involved and supportive of the school. Therefore, RSHS expects students to excel both inside and outside of the classroom. Control, optimism, resilience, and empowerment are the school's core values. Dr. Farrington, welcome. We are so excited to have you.
And thank you. And this opportunity is so magnificent because I hope that you guys walk away with some real strategies and tools that can be used on the ground and that are actionable and you can put into place tomorrow.
Awesome. What a perfect setup for exactly where we want to go. Now, I will, I guess, formally introduce myself. My name's Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. My background is I'm a school psychologist, came over to the WhyTry organization from public ed about 6 years ago. I oversee research, development, and the training modules, and we specialize in resilience and social emotional learning concepts. I was published on resilience. That's kind of how I ended up here. And we started doing these webinars about a year and a half ago, really at the beginning part of the pandemic in 2020, geez. And they just kind of took on a life of their own. It's turned into a community that I really, really value. I love being a part of it. I love seeing some of you that show up every week or every other week when we have these, and I love meeting new people through these. And then one of my very favorite things is being able to rub shoulders with our panelists who are always just incredible examples to me of what it really means to be resilient and what it means to be a top tier educator. And I love finding people that have the same type of passion and value system as I do and we do as an organization. The other thing that I did want to mention before we jump into our discussion, because I do want to give proper credit to this organization as well, and we'll probably mention it again, but April and Dr. Farrington, besides being incredible educators are also affiliated with a group called the Off School Grounds Coalition. And we've had several panelists on over the last year and a half that are part of our friends there. I feel like your family now, the OSG group there. And this has been a really, really important relationship for us organizationally, to find an organization that has such common values as we do, about building community and building individuals. So we're always really honored to be able to have guests that represent that organization as well, and the good work that they're doing. So I always like to shout them out, and Mark's usually fantastic about throwing links up in the chat. So if you're interested at all in their work, by all means, take a look at some of those. So with that, let's jump into our discussion today, and I want to start with maybe just a little bit of background. If you could tell us a little bit about your schools, and some of the things that you've been focusing on over the last, little while, 1 to 2 years, whatever has kind of been your primary focus through this recent challenging phase of education. I'd love to hear about that. Let's hear first from April, and then we'll go second from Dr. Farrington.
Thank you, Jason. So yes, Dr. Farrington. My school is Liberation Diploma Plus High School. We are a very small alternative school located in Coney Island, Brooklyn, which some feel like it's its very own borough, all on its own. We are in our 15th year at Liberation. I am the founding principal who wrote the actual proposal and fought a very long and hard fight to make Liberation a reality. We serve students typically from the ages of 16 to 21. I've been known to keep students till 22, maybe a little later if they were really close. And it serves a greater purpose, I think, than many would ever understand when it comes to understanding alternative education. And I do really wish, and I said this earlier, I do wish that there's a day when alternative schools no longer have to exist, because our students are being serviced and getting all that they need where they are, because that means they would have experienced a little less heartache and would have experienced less doors being closed in their faces prior to coming to us. So honestly, I hope that some of what we share today is utilized across the nation, where schools can be better at what they're doing in serving students like ours who end up being considered overaged, undercredited, and at risk of dropping out of high school. The last 2 years, dealing with COVID just really increased the ante of what we always have been trying to do. And that's meeting our students every which way they are, how they are, and with whatever shape they are in, and whichever way they come to our doors. Doing a real needs assessment. And when I say needs assessment, it's really knowing what their needs are, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, but in their soul, in their spirit, and understanding their experiences, where they can get to the point where they trust you enough to say, I need toilet paper. I'm hungry. I don't have a place to wash my clothes. And that's why, you might see me once a week, so people don't see me wear the same thing throughout the entire week. The last 2 years has really been about building a resilience through a different understanding of hope. I feel like our communities and our young people have been hit so hard that they have lost hope in a lot of ways. And in that, right, the biggest thing is to get them academically prepared to be functional in life post high school. So in fulfilling all of their needs, making sure they're not hungry, making sure that they're clothed, making sure that they have the basic needs at home, also making sure that they are being provided the academic tools necessary to be successful post high school. And for our students who tend to be older, one of the newer challenges that we're facing is that the job market, the lower, they're lower paying jobs that will lead to nowhere. However, that job market has expanded tremendously for our young people, where they're now working, whether it's Uber Eats or Amazon or FedEx or UPS, to serve this larger COVID need. Our young people have found another way to survive in their current conditions. And part of the fight and the challenge is giving them hope through school and letting them know that here there's something larger that they'll gain if they just stick through it.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's amazing. Amazing the work you're doing there. Dr. Farrington, tell us a little bit about your school, what your focus has been this last little bit.
Again, thank you again. Research and Service, like April School, is a transfer school, and we do cater to overage, undercredited students. I approximately have 200 students, 220 students, 106 are currently 20 years old already. And I have a couple of students who are actually older than 20. So the things that we've been focusing on throughout this pandemic in these past 2 years, and really since our inception 9 years ago, because I too, like April and the founding principal, I wrote the proposal for the school. The thing that we've been trying to focus on is going back to our core values, because COVID attacked them in so many different ways. So the first core value that we have is control. And what I tell my young people is, you don't have control over the world, but you do have control over how you respond to it, right? We don't have control over COVID, but we have control over our responses to COVID. We have control over our safety when it comes to COVID, in terms of wear your mask, baby, keep everybody protected, right? Wash your hands, keep everybody protected. You have control over that. And I teach that with their behaviors as well. You don't have control over the things that life is throwing at you, but you have control over how you respond and react to life. You don't have control over the fact that your family got evicted, but you have control over how do you respond to being evicted? What things do you put in place? Our second core value is optimism. You have to hope and believe like never before. You have to hope and believe that the lessons that we are trying to instill in you, both social emotional lessons, academic lessons, resiliency lessons, all of these lessons, you have to hope and believe that what it is we're saying, you have to be optimistic that what it is we're saying is the right thing and will put you on the right path. And the third thing that we're focusing on, going back to our core values, is resiliency. You have to be academically resilient. You have to be emotionally resilient, and you have to respond to COVID in a resilient way. In 2020, from January 1st, 2020 through about August 2020, I personally lost 18 people. Some due to COVID, some not due to COVID. But I had to show my young people, you have to bounce back. It is going to be painful, but how do you turn your pain into passion and your passion into action? You have to be resilient. And the fourth thing that we focus on, again, going back to our core values, is empowerment. You have the power. You have the power. So when our young people are looking at what research and what service could they provide for the research that they're doing, what research is out there about how is COVID impacting your age group, your community? If we look at what the zip code maps say about the rate of COVID in your community, in your neighborhood, what service component that you have the power to produce can you put in place to ensure your community is safe, in addition to all the other service components, the voter registration drives, the stop police brutality stuff that we're doing, the hunger drives, the food drives, the SOP drives, all of these other things that these young people are doing. You have the power to change the trajectory of your community, even during COVID.
That's awesome. I love your description of hope as well. When you really dig into the research around resilience, hope and resilience are very, very strongly connected. Like you almost can't have one without the other. And so I think it's such a natural fit that you have both those together. I want to stay on that topic of resilience. And I think it's one of the common values that we all share is this goal to try to help improve and increase resilience in ourselves and the individuals around us, whether it's our students or our staff or whoever we're working with. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about some of the ways you're seeing your students and your staff be resilient. And let's go Dr. Farrington and then April on this one.
So in New York City, we were shut down and then open back up and shut down. And some people could come in and some people couldn't come in. And I didn't want to get vaccinated and I had to get vaccinated and I got taken off the payroll because there was just so much happening. And this was the first time I had told my staff, I'm really pushing the train as opposed to everybody working together in order to make this train move. And the reason why that is because there were just so many new policies that came out. And every time I put a protocol in place, something else happened and we had to quickly, what they call pivot. And I had to teach my staff to be resilient through that. Do not let up. Please, listen, I'm not any policy maker. I have to follow the guidelines to the best way I can. But, I'll be honest with you. I break rules. I ask for forgiveness versus permission sometimes. And during this pandemic, I really had to do that as a leader, right? Pray I didn't get caught. But teaching them you have to be resilient in terms of there are new policies about learning that are coming out. There are new DOE initiatives that came out this school year. At least 4 or 5 major initiatives came out for the first day of school. We have to work through those things. And then with our young people, right, we're dealing with not just COVID, we're still dealing with the other traumas that they're dealing with, right? We're still dealing with students who are killed. We're still dealing with parents who are dealing with domestic violence in front of their children. We're still dealing with, just this week alone, I had 2 of my star basketball players in a horrific car accident that made the news. And tonight we're playing a championship game. So teaching the kids how to be resilient through that, right? How do you bounce back? You have to channel the energy of the enemy and use it against them.
That's incredible. Great answer. And I know we're cheering for you. Miss April.
So the first way to showing resilience is simply by showing up in spite of and despite all of the challenges that we're facing, everything that COVID has thrown at us. Through all of the constant back and forth and the changes that Dr. Farrington alluded to, they still are showing up. And how they show up is not as important. Well, as how they show up doesn't necessarily equate their level of resilience. And what I mean by that is everyone is going to show how they're struggling in their own way. But I think sometimes honestly, I have to say that I think sometimes we underestimate the resilience of a person when they're not succeeding in your space, right? And for me, it's never taking for granted how resilient I know my young people are because of what they have to navigate every single day. That in spite of and despite that they may have witnessed some violence at home, or their best friend or their brother or their sister was just murdered the night before, that they still have to get up and survive, and they find ways to survive. And when they enter our school buildings, because they may be academically challenged or showing out their emotions, as educators, we sometimes mistaking that as their inability to be resilient. And we don't acknowledge everything they just went through in order to just walk through your doors. So for me, just showing up means a lot. That is half the battle. Now, the other part is, how do we transfer those skills, those resilient skills that are keeping you alive in these other spaces, that has empowered you and gave you the motivation and the desire to walk through these doors? How do we get you to be fully present and transfer those same skills so that you can overcome all of the academic challenges that are in your way, that we can help you learn how to react to constant change and the things that we are not in control of in a way that's going to reap success. And the same conversation with staff as well. They've been through a lot as well. And, accommodations came and went. They stood home, they were back. They wish they could have still went back home, but you're showing up. You didn't take other avenues that could have gotten you out. So I don't want to take for granted any of their resilience and what got them through to physically show up. But now it becomes my responsibility, as it is with my young people, to help them transfer those same skills into being fully now present. We just can't be present for our young people because we know what they need. So how am I helping you build your resilience here as an educator, so that you can be the best you can be, and even more, because my kids actually need more than you being the best that you can be.
That's so wise. And I'm glad you mentioned that piece on success. It's one of the real challenges. And, when I go out and teach and train on resilience, it's one of the things I have to point out is that success is a moving target. And like, your view of success for one person may be measured differently than it would be for another. Like, in a way, it's like we could almost all benefit from our own IEP. And I know that's the school psych in me talking, but there is some value in that from a resilience standpoint, because resilience is the showing up and not giving up as you work towards that. That's awesome. Did you have another comment, Dr. Farrington?
Yes, I just wanted to, coupled with resilience and part of the way in which you teach children resilience is your school has to be the haven for them to keep bouncing back into. Even if they're not doing well academically, like April said, your school must offer every single service. And I was getting ready to use the word work, but the problem with when we use the word work, like people have to do the work. The problem with using that word is it generally has a negative connotation, right? So as opposed to saying we have to do the work, what I'm going to say is we have to do the love, right? We have to do the love. And your school must be a hub for kids to receive every single service imaginable. I'm currently sitting in my school's food pantry. I'm at work right now. I'm in a place, in a room that is extremely massive, where kids can come and get anything they need for their household. But the person who runs the pantry is also trained. Ask this kid a question about what's going on at home, so that when you're speaking to this young person, you're gathering information, you're gathering data, so that now you can share that data with the rest of the team, so we can now all band up and circle around this young person and help them become resilient, because we all know your plight.
So good. I wanted to know that's a great lead in. So I was wondering, we have an interesting group of attendees on right now, and we have a lot of attendees that are on here that exist in more traditional models of education. And I think one of my favorite things about working with alternative educators and in that setting is some of the most valuable lessons I think we can learn in education come from that setting because of the challenges, that are dealt with there. So I was wondering if you could just talk briefly about, maybe describe how students end up in your school, like what's the process for how they end up in your school setting? And then number two, the second part of that is what are some lessons you've learned in your alternative settings that you think would benefit anybody, regardless of what their education setting is, regardless of what geographic region they may sit in? Because I think there's some really valuable universal lessons from there. Let's go first from Principal April, and then we'll go Dr. Farrington.
So students end up at Liberation because, well, a plethora of different reasons. Students fell behind academically. The majority of them are coming from very large comprehensive schools where they simply really just got lost. They were just a number. They didn't show up, just not showing up for one day turned into 5 days, 10 days, 30 days, 60 days, so on and so forth. Before they knew it, they were at 16 or 17. A guidance counselor was probably told, let's review our graduation cohort, and saw a list of kids who were not going to meet the graduation expectancy, and then were counseled out. That's one way students get here. Another way students, some of my students have been incarcerated for some time. And upon leaving their incarcerated facility, if they did not take advantage or could not take advantage of the education available to them while they were incarcerated, they too return to their home schools and get counseled out, because that young person is not going to meet the graduation requirement for that school, and sort of like hurt the data. And then one thing the proud way I am of how students get to Liberation is generational, right? So having a brother or sister or a cousin or a nephew or a neighbor who says, you need to go to Liberation because you're not doing jack anything where you are, you're failing, and if you go here, you'll be taken care of. And then some kids are court recommended. Based on the relationships, a word of mouth. There are certain district attorney, certain even officers, relationships I've built with the officers in the community. They meet young people in trouble and in crisis now, and they're having conversations like, did you ever think about going to Liberation? I think if you go here, it'll help turn your life around. That's how students end up here. The second part of that question was,
lessons you've learned doing that. And you know what, while you're thinking about that, so the second part is lessons you've learned that would be helpful for people that may be in more traditional models of education. I'm going to come back to you for that. While you're thinking about that, Dr. Farrington, do you want to maybe just discuss how people end up in your school?
So much like April's kids, but here's the other way in which they end up here. To be honest, other transfer schools recommend them. So there are 2 schools in New York City that cater to this overage, undercredited population. And those principals will say, my community may not be able to support you, so I'm going to send you to people who I know can and will. And we speak at length with different principals, and we bounce ideas, and there's professional thievery. Because the common thread through every school, whether it's traditional or not, the tradition should still be love. The traditions should still be love.
Oh my goodness, this is why, like, I want to cheer. I get goosebumps every time we have our good friends from the Off School Grounds Coalition on, because you are so committed to the love and really reaching out and helping these kids that in a lot of cases other people have given up on. Principal April, talk a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned in this setting that you think are applicable to educators anywhere, because I know there's some valuable ones in there.
So I think it's my lessons in life, my own experiences and my family experiences that really determined the how and the why I was going to lead this school as if it's a home, as with all love. The majority of my students by the time they graduate, they don't call me Miss Leong, they call me mom. I'm a mother to hundreds, and I thank my sons for allowing, me to be shared with so many others through raising them. But I think what's most important, one of the most important things that traditional schools should keep in mind is that at no point should you allow the data to determine what a young person can and cannot accomplish. You cannot fear the data, your graduation data. And I know that's a lot to say, and I know that the stakes are usually high. Your superintendent probably comes after you, your district, the city, the state, the government. But if we continue to look at students as if they are numbers on a data board and get worried when they're not going to look good at the end, when you throw them away or when you push them aside, the important thing to remember is that they don't disappear. They're not going to evaporate and just disappear because they're no longer in your data. Please look at every young person in your building as a life, as a human being who may not have been afforded the same opportunities you have, or just may need more time. Ask yourself, what have I not done for this young person, as opposed to what this young person has not done at my school before counseling them out or before giving up hope. Do an inventory of your school before you even inventory what a child needs or what a family needs. What does your school offer? Does your school have counseling services? Do you have a good relationship in the community? Are you present in the community? So that the community can offer you resources that are needed. What's your relationship like with the police in your community? Right? How do you ensure that you are making sure students are safe outside of your building? Do you have a pantry? If you don't have a pantry, do you have a relationship with other organizations that can help a family in need? You have to do a self-assessment of what you are not offering so that you can stay true to what can you offer for a young person. So when we say really know who your children are, it's knowing who they are, it's knowing what the family struggles are, it's knowing what's missing in the community. How can your presence in the community uplift an entire community? This is who we are. This is what we do. And I know Dr. Allison has more to add, but one more thing I want to say is be present. Your children should know who you are as much as you know who they are. You have to be visible and you have to be present. You have to be uplifting. You have to be supportive. If you're not a mom, be their aunt. If you're not a mom or an aunt, be their cousin. Be a brother, be a sister, be somebody who has a vested interest in caring because you love who they are. Let them feel that love. Don't talk about it, just really be about it.
Oh my goodness. I'm like hovering above my chair. I want to just jump up and yell, amen. This is so good. Dr. Farrington, what could you add to that?
So I'm gonna steal April's last sentence and say, and start with saying, be as open with your students, regardless of title, as possible. Allow these young people, because that part is free, right? And I'll get to my second point in a second. That part is free, because I know some people are sitting on here and say, well, we don't have no money to do this. We ain't tell you what to do yet. Everything we told you is free. My office is literally in the middle of the hallway. That's free. Change where you sit. That is the most open door policy ever. There is a desk in the middle of the hallway. I spend a couple of $100 to get a phone installed in the middle of the hallway. All of my meetings happen in the middle of the hallway. I don't care if the chancellor's coming. I don't care if Jesus is coming to meet with me. You're meeting me in the hallway. Because when a kid is upset, they need to see you. They need to know exactly where it is they can go to seek help. If a kid wants to show off that they got an A on their test, they don't need to knock on the door to show and be scared to go into the little principal's office or the guidance counselor's office. Be strategic about if you are a leader, be strategic around where you place people's offices. Why is the guidance counselor office down in the basement someplace, or the social worker's office is off in the cut? Why does your social worker look weird? Let's think about this too, right? Kids don't want to go receive help from people that look crazy. Let's be honest, right? So be very intentional about how you use your space. Today we had an honor roll celebration in the middle of the hallway. Normally I would have kids off to the side and do a little luncheon in a room. No, display your brilliance. Have that honor roll luncheon in the middle of the hallway and make it as beautiful as possible so every kid could want to be invited the next time. So now let's go into the money part. Leverage your budget. I know a lot of people who may not be administrators on the call will say, my school does not have money. Yes, they do. I promise you. Here's how you figure it out whether or not your school has money. When it's time for the fiscal year to close, how many boxes of paper are being delivered? How many boxes of pens are being delivered? That simply means that people did not know how to leverage their budgets and did not want the budget to go to waste. So I'm going to buy all of this supply stuff and just stuff it in the closet someplace. No, don't do that. When you're looking at how to be strategic and sharing of practices, why is your PTA meeting in the principal's office? Most parents who have troubled children hate the principal's office because it's always some place in which the child is being reprimanded, the parent is embarrassed. Your PTA meeting should be at Broadway shows. Your PTA meeting should be at concerts. And then when you establish a relationship with the parent in a non-traditional way, they'll show up to everything else traditionally. They'll show up to an open school night. They'll show up if you just ask them to volunteer for something because they're no longer afraid of you. You have to think about what exposure do you give to young people? The secret sauce that research has given these children a childhood and an adulthood at the exact same time. So I do leverage my budget, and I make sure that the kids go on trips, whether it's rock climbing, ice skating, roller skating, skiing, international trips, national trips. I take every kid every year, well, pre-COVID, and this year now that trips are back on, take them to Disney World, all free. Expose them to activities that allow them to be happy, but then also have Lays Elliott build a music studio in your school so that the kids who may be quiet, but they're quiet because they're dreaming about music, they now have an outlet, and you can garner a relationship with that young people, with that young person. You have to think about how do you really, really, really be strategic. We have all of these young people who play video games. What do their parents do? Take the video game from them? No, have esports at your school. In order for you to be on this esports team and win scholarship money, right? If you could play Madden at the school, after school or on Saturdays, but you got to come to school first. Mom, don't take the gaming device. We have an actual team that does this thing. So you have to think outside of the box. We can't keep doing things traditionally. And these are not things that are just relegated to alternative schools. They should be in every school, right? How do you just shut classes down some days? And this is going back to the free stuff. How do you shut class down some days and just have field day with high school kids? How do you allow them to really have that true SEL time where they're not stressing about classwork? They're not stressing about life. They're just happy to be normal. They're happy to laugh, because one of the biggest gifts I wish I can give my young people, I wish I can give them back their childhood. Because all too often in our communities with our young people, at the age of 10, they're raising siblings. At the age of 15, when they should be in school on time, miss, I couldn't get here early because I had to drop my little sister off to school. Miss, I can't go to Saturday school because I have to bring your little sister to Saturday school too so you can get the tutoring. Bring your baby to Saturday school so you and your baby have book clubs. If you have children that have children, if you have students that have children, right? Have book clubs where you as the leader or your English teacher, whomever it is reading to the student and their child. Those are free resources. Have your librarian set up things where they're Zooming with students who have babies and they're teaching them parenting skills at the exact same time. So there's so many different things that you can do. You just have to be creative. You have to love. You have to be courageous. And you have to learn the art of asking for forgiveness as opposed to permission.
Yes.
So good. And I want to emphasize when Dr. Farrington says that her office is in the hall, that is not an exaggeration. The first Zoom call, introductory call that we had, I was so confused for a minute because there was all this background noise. And I'm like, why does she have such a rough connection? And then I realized, and our friend Mark, who's on here, I said, Mark, is she in the hall? And he said, yeah, her office is in the hall. And I was so struck by it. It was such an impressive example of, you know, when you say, don't just talk about it, be about it. Like that was as strong of an example as I've ever seen of that. It was amazing, but I imagine it's given you incredible opportunities to build relationships with your students, your kiddos there. April, I hope I didn't cut you off. Did you have something you were going to add?
No, I mean, we can go on for days.
Well, let's do this instead, because I think I have a follow-up that's a kind of a connection that will allow you to do this. So both of you, I've been really impressed. You've articulated well, you know, you have some very specific and I think very unique challenges that have probably forced you both to have to be pretty creative when it comes to dealing with challenges and problem solving and figuring out how you're going to address certain things. I was wondering if you had some specific tips or strategies. I know you mentioned it towards the beginning, April, like we got some strategies I want that you want to share. Share any tips or strategies right now. This would be a good time to do it with our attendees. Also, if you have any thoughts on creativity, like any tips for how to be more creative or be creative in general when it comes to problem solving in education, because I think creativity is at this point really like a necessity, you know, for I think almost all educators. I think all of us run into metaphoric walls at different points on things we want to do, and so we do have to get creative. But let's talk tips and strategies. Let's go April first, and then Dr. Farrington.
So in the previous question, like, you know, again, doing a school inventory, what is it that you are offering, and what are your needs? So for the students that you're looking at who are not making the cut, do an honest assessment, a real assessment of why the students are not succeeding. Do you know what their home situation is like? If hunger, if you're in a community where poverty is real, then inside your school, do you have resources such as a pantry, such as clothing, such as basic toiletries? And if you don't, do a look into your budget, right? Instead of that extra paper that may not be needed and may sit there for years and years as you keep adding more paper on top of the paper. Think of other ways you can use that money. And if you honestly do not, build relationships. Let me say this, there's a word that has to be accepted when you take on this job, and the word is sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice your time. Your day is not going to go from 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 Monday through Friday. You're going to have to sacrifice time to get out into your community, to network, to find out where these resources are so that the resources are inside of your building. Please make sure you are present. How does your day go? How do your students know you? What do they call you? Do they even know your name? You can do a quick survey as students enter the door with some very short, basic questions. Look at your human capital in your building. What are their roles? How many adults in your building are assigned or regulated to just work in the basement or the office? How often do they get out and work with students? Have you considered looking at your student population and using your human capital? If you don't have a CBO, I understand everybody does not have a community-based organization where you may have other adults available to young people, but that's okay, because before I had Liberation, I didn't have a community-based organization either, but I had guidance counselors, I had committed staff. Separate your compliant people and your committed people, and use your committed people to really work closely with students. What are their needs? Which personalities are going to best match a student who's exhibiting X behavior? What are other ways to really know? Does the community know who you are? Do you attend any of the city council meetings? Do you attend any of the meetings at the local law enforcement office? Like, are you present? Again, physically present. When you say creative, I think just growing up, like, we learn how to make $1 out of 15 cents. So you just make it all stretch. And I'm actually going to let Dr. Farrington answer more of the creative part of the question, because she does amazing off the wall things. But I do want to say this: I don't ask permission. And I know that sounds scary to a lot of people, right? And I know when I say, don't let data dictate what you do or don't do for a young person, I know that sounds scary as well. But let me say this: when you do all of these other things that I'm asking you to do to really serve our young people, even when you ask forgiveness instead of permission, and you make the right choices for young people, you are going to end up where you're supposed to end up. And that's on the right side of right. I have a mentor, Dr. Gasaway, and he always said, you can't serve two masters, right? So when you walk into your building, if you don't understand servitude, and if you're not willing to sacrifice, everything we have to offer is not going to work. Because in order for your young people to feel that love, they're going to watch everything you do. More, as a matter of fact, they're going to watch what you don't do. And what you do is going to really need sacrifice. There's one thing we didn't mention, and I know we're both on the same page with this: pushing your educators to be morally responsible for what they do and don't do as well in those classrooms. Do not turn a blind eye for people who are very good at being compliant when you're in front of them, but behind you are not getting the job done. COVID has done a lot to a lot of people. And I think one thing we all have to accept is that we have to change. We cannot do the same things we did before and think it's going to work. So part of that is working harder. Part of that is reassessing where your staff are at too, because just like we're watching where our young people are at, Are your staff responding to the supports that they're being provided? Are you providing the supports that they need? Because if you're not, then you're failing the kids when they walk into the classrooms. And it's not just about feeding them. It's not just about keeping them warm. It's not just about building their social emotional resilience. It's also, and more importantly, about building their academic resilience so that they can succeed. And teachers cannot mistake the two.
That's powerful. Thank you. Dr. Farrington.
So I agree with April. You're supposed to do what's right because it's right. Right? It may not be policy, but you do what's right because it's right. It really is that simple. It's the right thing to do. If we talk about the creative aspect, I see the blessing and the beauty of ADD is you invent all of these stories in your mind that are real colorful. And then if you know how to channel your energy enough, you just make them real, right? And you make them actionable. But then also the beauty of being a leader is finding out who's on your bus, finding out what their talents and abilities are in order to put them in the right seat.
Yep. Having
A dynamic team of people who, if you know that creativity, if you know you have no swag, what are we doing? But if you see that there is a teacher that all of the kids are gravitating to, if you see that there's a school aide, or if you see that there's a counselor, right? Put them in charge of some stuff. Ask them for ideas. Wait, let's stop. Wait, did anybody ask kids what they want yet? Did anybody speak to children about what it is they want? What kind of school environment they need? What should the school look like and feel like when they enter into the school building? Right? My kids say that this school feels like the living room in their homes. In fact, they don't want to go home at all. My kids been out of school for almost an hour now. They're running around in the hallways. And that's a great thing. So the creativity doesn't have to lie in the leader, because there are people in your camp who are creative. And you also have to allow them, you have to trust them to fly. You have to trust them to fly. They should present every idea to you. You have to be the logistic operational person and make sure that this thing will be safe and organized. Yes, whatever it is. But allow them to have a voice as well. If you come into my home, there are pictures of my children on the wall. If you come into my school home, there are pictures of my children on the wall. That's free stuff. Take a picture of them and hang it up. They won't destroy their faces. They love seeing that. They'll run and grab a teacher and say, look, my thing is up here. My essay is here. That's a picture of me doing well. And you're right. I mean, the beauty, like April said, is of our lived life experiences is we are both empathetic and sympathetic, which allows us to be inspirational to our young people. I can always say, I understand, and I really mean that. I can really say that, I get it. But now what? How do we move forward from this thing? The other thing that people have to do is not just go to your city council meetings and go to your police meeting. You have to go to where your children live.
Yep.
And you have to exist in that space. You have to fully understand it in order to think about what it is that they are dealing with, because people don't understand. Your kid that's on honor roll, your kid that has the highest average, may be getting abused, which is why he or she has the highest average. It may have suicide ideation. You have to go out into the communities in which your children come from, and not just you, your entire staff needs to go. Whether it's the secretary who needs to understand the conditions that these young people are living in. So when the kid is coming to the secretary, say, can I get a notebook? What are you yelling at the kid for? At least they came to ask for a notebook. Can I get a pen? What are you yelling at them for? At least they came and asked to get a pen. People need to truly see how these young people are living. And then you also have to understand that you may have some kids in more affluent neighborhoods, right? That may have everything. But I tell you this, the mentality of poverty jumps on to those who are not impoverished. I'll say that one more time. the mentality of poverty may jump onto those who are not impoverished. So you have to understand the conditions in which these young people live in order to provide the solutions and the love for them so they can be successful, regardless of how affluent they are. But then also, when we were kids and we became extremely creative. We made wrestling belts out of cardboard. We didn't have gymnastics, but we used the cardboard in order to learn how to flip and do, I mean, I'm dating myself, right? Tell you how old I am, but we learned how to flip and how to do head spins, and we would break them. That's extremely creative. Leverage there what we think is a weakness in poverty. You have to be extremely creative to figure out what meal you're gonna make with 3 pieces of 3 hot dogs. You have to be extremely creative. Leverage that. Listen, go live out where they live. And then also the last thing I'll say on this, and this is not even being creative, this is just being like common sense. Stop suspending kids for hoodies, do-rags, and hats. Those things have no bearing on a kid's ability to learn. We just don't like how it looks aesthetically. We just don't like how it looks aesthetically. And we put these kids in a cycle of being suspended because maybe they said something to an adult, because an adult told them to take their hat off. What if my hair's not done? What if I don't want to take my hoodie off because the shirt I have underneath is dirty? What if I don't want to change into my gym clothes? And I'm being real, honest and raw. What if a girl doesn't want to change into her gym clothes because she only has one bra and everybody will see that? We have to think about the policies that we have in place that negatively impact our children. And many of those policies are built on them being compliant, which have no bearing on their ability to learn. But when we disassociate them from the place of learning, we also disassociate them from the place in which they can receive love. So examine your practices and your policies.
And I just want to
Amen,
add one
amen,
thing,
amen.
a creative way also, because sometimes young people, if you haven't built the level of trust that's necessary for young people to receive what you're offering, because they're kind of embarrassed or they don't really trust your intention. One of the things I've done is we rig sort of raffles, right? So I know there's a need. So we'll raffle, like create a raffle. And we already know who the winners are, but everybody put their name in the box. And that's just our way to bring that young person closer to feeling like it's okay to receive without putting them on the spot. It's a thin line, right, to walk for a lot of individuals, especially who may not have shared or like experiences, to mistakenly know how to deal with a young person once all of these things are exposed, right? So we go to their home, you find out their living conditions, and you would never have thought that the young person who's showing up is living in filth or whatever. And then that young person comes to school. What I ask you do not ever do is now give the young person excuses for why they won't show up or did not do the work. Don't worry about it. It's okay. I got you. You do not have our kids. You do not have their best interests in mind when instead of giving them other ways to get the work done, you accept excuses for the work not getting done, right? So don't have them think that they can do less because they come from less. Help them understand that you will scaffold, you will do all of the scaffolding in the world, you will make all of the accommodations necessary to meet their needs, but you are expecting that they are still reaching the goal so that they can, because that's the real escape out of their current condition. You are not helping them elevate themselves beyond their current condition if you allow them to make excuses for why they cannot.
Absolutely. That's so good. Hey, are you doing all right on time? If we go like an extra 12 minutes over, we don't have like a set start end time where we make the rules here, but are you all right if we go? This is really rich. And I have at least one more question that I do want to give you a chance to respond to. Is that all right with both of you? Okay.
Yes.
All your comments are making me think. They're like, I think one of the things, and I'm just realizing it right now, like I'm having a real aha moment listening to you both. I think one of the challenges we don't talk enough in education about, and you've both described it really well, but there's this thing that exists, whereas educators, we get caught in the middle of this really interesting world where most of us get into this world of education because we want to help kids. We want to be an advocate for kids, but then we get into it, and the path into this world requires you to be part of an institution or an organization. And we occupy sometimes this middle ground that sometimes it feels like it's at odds with each other. On the one hand, I'm an employee of an organization that pays my check and gives me my marching orders. On the other hand, I'm there every day with these kids, and I feel this deep moral obligation to do right for these kids. And as much as we want to believe that everything's going to be in the best interest of our kids, all of us that are educators have that eye-opening experience your first year in education of, hey, sometimes all of these policies or all of these things that are designed to help all the kids don't actually help all the kids. And so we don't have time to get into it today, but I'm so grateful for your honesty about that, because I think as educators, we really, really do have to confront that on a regular basis. There are moments where we have to say, like, I remember my first year as a school psych, that I had a kid I was working with. He didn't have shoes. Every day he wore football cleats into the classroom. They were like 4 sizes too big. They curled up on the ends. It was the only shoes he had. And I said, I want to give this kid some shoes. And I got told, no, you can't buy him shoes. It's against school policy. You got to run him through the proper thing. Finally, I said, well, I can't do it anymore. Sneaked him some shoes because in my heart, I knew that's what I needed to do. But we have these situations. And I think as educators, these discussions are so important because they help us figure out how to navigate that space. And it can be tricky sometimes. I'm so thrilled for this conversation. Here's the one I want to end. Well, this will be my second to last, but I'm going to put a time limit on it. So try to keep your answers to like under 4 minutes. I want to talk just a little bit. One of the important things that the Off School Grounds Coalition is really committed to is building and strengthening communities. And you've both discussed the power, the importance of communities. I think it's one of the things I'm most impressed by with what you do. Could you share just a little bit about your approach to building and connecting with communities, how you do that, how that organization helps you, and how you recommend just maybe one or two little pieces of advice for strengthening that community support? Try to keep it under 4 minutes so we can be somewhat respectful of time. Let's go Dr. Farrington and then April.
So New York City is a little different. We're broken into 5 boroughs. I have students that come from all 5 boroughs, right? And those boroughs have little areas and neighborhoods that are all different, all culturally different, economically different. But you leverage the community in that you go into the community stores and you say, listen, my kids come here all the time to get this bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich every morning. It's making them late. I have no problem with them coming here to spend money with you. But can you have these sandwiches pre-packaged? As a matter of fact, what it is I'll do for you, I'll pay for a couple. And then in return, can you kick my kids out this store before, the school day starts so they can be on time to their first period? Oh, you know what? Why don't you come in and see the actual school? Why don't you spend some time with me so you can see how these kids perform? Because you also have to change the community's perspective of these students, especially the students that April and I have, right? Because a kid in here, knock on wood, we haven't had a fight since before the lockdown. But I can't say that that's true when they get on the bus and the train and they're wearing a big research and service book bag. So you have to leverage your community by going out into it and also inviting the community into the school. Most people don't go into school buildings. They'll watch what happens on social media, they'll listen to what happens in the news, but when they come in and actually see the school and see the kids working, they're willing to do more. They're willing to provide more services. And those services, I mean, a Zoom conference, a Zoom does this pantry no justice. This box does this pantry no justice because it looks like something really small. But when people come in and see it, they're like, this thing is massive. How can I donate to that thing? So you have to invite people into your school community to see the brilliance and the resilience of the young people, so they can feel the energy and the spirit, so they can watch these young people read books or work on laptops or play music or just smile. They have to come in to see that.
Really
So-
good. April.
Yeah, so Off School Grounds really has provided us a platform for educators, like-minded educators, and even educators who are not sure where they stand in anything. It's giving everybody a platform to come together, share best practices, be supportive of one another. And just one of the brilliant things that has come out of OSG is not just that educators come together and share best practices, but it's a sisterhood and a brotherhood of people who really care about young people so much. You care about young people so much that you're willing to be vulnerable and honest and open to a room of other educators in the hopes that they will support you and make you better at what you need to be better at to best support young people. And that's what OSG has done. It's given us this space to be brave, to be honest, to be empowering of one another. We lift each other up and we share resources. Many people may not have ever thought about a pantry. You go, Dr. Farrington, like, what? Girl, how did you do that? And now Dr. Farrington can share those gems. April, how did you create a program where the most unlikely young people would ever work with police that has led to these amazing programs? Well, let me show you how. What do you mean you have to really know your community? Let me show you how. So Off School Grounds brings together these brilliant educators who have different superpowers, and we're able to really form our own superhero league. Because at the end of it, it's not about us. While we may be living our wildest dreams within OSG, when we get better, our students are better served. And at the end of it is how we serving our young people. So my recommendation for other people, if you do not have your own OSG, please find it. It's lonely in our spaces. And if you are phenomenal in your work, don't be greedy and hoard the gems. Be willing to give them out freely to colleagues all around you, because when you help them, you're multiplying the amount of young people that you're helping as well.
Just want to jump in really quickly. I'm sorry. The most important thing that OSG has taught me, and really has allowed me to be, is vulnerable, right? When April talked about this brotherhood and sisterhood, it truly, truly, truly is that. And because there is this deep-rooted family connection throughout OSG, I can laugh, I can cry, I can talk about my failures, I can talk about my issues, and people can counsel me in my spirit, which will allow me to have a space in my heart and my mind to do more for these young people. Because sometimes the connections with OSG, they're not, I mean, of course they're professional because we're a group of professional people, but they're personal and they're internalized. And it's a band and a movement that moves in one direction for greatness. Greatness for our young people, greatness for the individual, greatness for the collective community. So the fact that I can be vulnerable with these people, because I'm used to being the thugged out, rock hard one. But no, when I'm sick, I got somebody I can call. When my heart is broke behind somebody, there's a community of people who will text me, email me, WhatsApp me, call me, show up to my house, pop up unannounced to my school, just to make sure I'm okay. The vulnerability that we have to be in each other's spaces and be real with each other in this space called OSG is magnificent. And it's something that I look forward to every daggone Thursday.
Well, and I'll tell you, I feel so fortunate just I feel like your OSG family has made me a better person, better educator, better practitioner, just by being able to be on here with as many of you as I have. And I'm very, very grateful for that. April, did you have another thing?
I just want to say, if you do not have a OSG home, you're welcome to join our OSG family. I know Mark has it in the chat. Please stop on in, get a taste of our creator, our leader, our fearless leader who calls us out when we're wrong and pushes us to be better and stronger. And that's Dennis McKeezy, who I'm forever thankful for as well. But this is an open invitation. It doesn't cost anything, just your time.
Absolutely. And Dennis is incredible behind the scenes, just doing all the incredible work. But I will say, don't show up to OSG if you're not interested in having a good time as well. You better be interested in being able to find the joy through all the vulnerabilities. So it's such an impressive group. Let's wrap this up. We've got a whole bunch of people that have stayed on with us, and thank you so much for your time. I think this discussion has been so important. There's so much more we could talk about, but we want to be respectful to everyone's time. Let's close with one last question. I want you to pick just one thing that you can shout out that's currently either giving you hope or a recent success that you want to make sure gets mentioned on here. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put up some contact information for you as our panelists and for us as a WhyTry organization, in case anybody wants to get a hold of us. Let's go April first and then Dr. Farrington. April, what's something that's given you hope or you feel like is a recent success you want to shout out?
Well, during the toughest of times and not taking excuses, hitting the streets during COVID, literally hitting the streets and going to apartments and dropping off toilet paper and all of these other essentials, we managed to increase our graduation rate, and many students who otherwise would not have graduated have graduated and are moving on to better and greater things.
That is incredible. Congratulations and great job. And so I'm so happy to hear that for those kiddos that you're taking care of. What an important thing in their life. Dr. Farrington.
Yes, the thing that has given me so much hope and inspiration is the fact that my young people are returning in masses and droves back to school. Like April talked about in the beginning, our kids making $15 an hour saw that as a lot of money. And then when they started to realize that the better opportunity was at research, to simply sit in the love and learn at the exact same time. So $15 an hour will never be acceptable. They're coming back to school in droves. And they're coming much earlier because they said, I was late showing up. Showed up to school in October and it started in September. Or I showed up to school in December and it started in September. They're showing up and they're showing up in droves. And I'm really excited about what that means in terms of graduation rates and credit accumulation.
That's incredible. I love hearing that. I feel like a broken record. It's you all, it's the educators, it's my community. This is the thing that's given me hope. I said it before, but we thought 2021, I think a lot of us were hoping it was going to be a little bit easier than 2020. We were hoping 2020 was the real tough one, but 2021's been just as hard, in some ways even more difficult. And I just continue to be impressed, you know, circling all the way back. I think you both mentioned it, but you talked about resilience. Kind of the first step of resilience is just showing up. And some of the people I admire the most have just kept showing up through all of this, and they're doing it, and they're making a difference in these kids' lives. And I'm so grateful just to have a small part of it, and to be able to affiliate with all you. Just thank you so much. Let's give a big round of applause for our panelists. April, Dr. Farrington, thank you. You did phenomenal. Big shout out to our friends at the Off School Grounds Coalition, and huge thank you to our panelists, or to our attendees that keep showing up. You keep showing up, you keep participating in the discussion, you share your ideas, and you cheer on these incredible voices that we're so proud to be able to put on here. Thanks, everybody. By the way, we had Lays Elliott show up. He was active in the chat.